Hello everyone, back again with movie and tune recap. Today, I'm going to explain an American supernatural horror film from 2021, titled Seance. Spoilers ahead, so watch out and take care. The movie opens at Edelvine Academy for Girls, where a group of students led by the ruthless popular girl Alice, tries to summon the Edelvine ghost, an urban legend about a former student who supposedly killed herself in a bathtub. During the ritual, the girls chant the words to summon the ghost, but one of them, Carrie, refuses to join in because she is scared, and suddenly, a loud noise comes from the bathtub, which startled everyone. When Alice and the girls investigates, they find the tub filled with blood, and suddenly, a bloody woman emerges and grabs Alice. Terrified, the group panics and Carrie runs back to her dorm room. However, it turns out to be a cruel prank staged by Alice and her friends, Bethany and Lenora, to frighten the others. While in her room, Carrie sees a masked figure watching her from the closet and she screams, drawing the attention of the other girls. To their horror, they find Carrie's lifeless body outside the dorm, having apparently fallen from her window. The scene then shifts to Camille Meadows, a new transfer student arriving at the academy. She is welcomed by the headmistress, Mrs. Landry, and a fellow student, Helena, who shows her to her new room, the same one Carrie had before her death. Helena explains the school's rules and daily routines before leaving Camille alone, and as she settles in, Camille notices strange and unsettling things happening in the room. That evening during dinner, Camille unknowingly sits at a table claimed by fellow students Lenora and Yvonne, who angrily confront her and tell her to leave. Helena arrives and tells Camille that they should go and sit elsewhere, and just then, Alice arrives with Bethany and Rosalind. Alice mocks Camille and orders her to leave the table, and when Camille refuses, a heated fistfight between Camille and Alice occurs, which is broken up by Mrs. Landry.
Stop that immediately!
As punishment for the physical altercation, Mrs. Landry assigns detention to all the girls involved: Camille, Alice, Helena, Bethany, Lenora, Yvonne, and Rosalind. That night in her room, Camille catches a glimpse of Carrie's ghost when the light begins to flicker. She then sees a figure hiding under her blanket, but it turns out to be a nightmare. The next morning, Mrs. Landry's son Trevor, who works as a handyman at the academy, stops by Camille's room to fix the flickering light. During their conversation, Trevor reveals that he grew up at the academy and is familiar with the ghost stories surrounding Carrie's death, and the two share a friendly chat before Camille heads off to class. Later in class, Mrs. Duncan announces that last semester's essay competition results are finalized, and Bethany won first place, earning a $250,000 college scholarship. However, Bethany looks uneasy. In detention that afternoon, Mrs. Landry assigns the girls a group project and warns them that they will remain in detention until it's completed. Setting aside their differences, Alice and her clique reluctantly agree to work with Camille and Helena to finish the project quickly. After getting some books from the library for their projects, Helena heads to the study lounge, leaving Camille alone. Moment later, she begins to hear strange noises and suddenly, a book falls off a shelf, and curious, she looks through the space between the books and is startled by the sight of a masked figure staring back at her. However, it turns out to be a cruel prank by Lenora and Yvonne, and they leave when Helena arrives and confronts them. Afterward, Helena and Camille discuss Carrie's mysterious death, and Alice interrupts them with an idea. She convinces them to participate in a seance to contact Carrie and uncover the truth about what happened to her. Though hesitant, Camille and Helena agree to join, and Camille notices Lenora hiding nearby and assumes the group is plotting another prank for them. During the seance, the girls are shocked and they genuinely make contact with a spirit that warns them that they will be murdered. As they process what just happened, Alice admits that while they initially planned to scare Helena and Camille during the seance, none of what occurred was their doing. Confused and afraid, the group debates whether they actually communicated with Carrie or the Edelvine ghost. Later, when detention ends, Lenora separates from the group, and as she takes a selfie with her phone, she notices a masked figure lurking in the background of the photo. Thinking it's one of the other girls playing a joke, she calls out but gets no response, and suddenly, a masked assailant attacks her from behind and drags her lifeless body away. The next day, during a dance recital, Mrs. Landry receives a call from Lenora's parents, worried about their daughter's disappearance. After the recital, Mrs. Landry calls the girls and questions them about Lenora's sudden disappearance. She informs them that Lenora's personal belongings are also missing and suspects that she may have run away. However, Alice and her friends insist Lenora would never leave without saying anything, and Mrs. Landry advised them to come to her if they hear anything about Lenora. Determined to uncover the truth, the group decides to investigate Lenora's room with the help of Trevor. In her room, they discover a strange cross drawn in blood on Lenora's bed. However, the girls are caught by Mrs. Landry and furious. She accuses the girls of playing pranks and warns them to stop meddling in Lenora's case. Undeterred, the girls research the symbol and discover it matches a pendant worn by Alicia Kane, a former Edelvine student who supposedly became the Edelvine ghost after her death. Later that night, Rosalind is taking a bath when the bathroom light suddenly flickers off. Startled, she turns the light back on but finds no one there, and suddenly, she's attacked by the masked assailant. Meanwhile, in her room, Camille notices a pen on the floor, and when she picks it up, she is horrified to find it covered in blood. Going to the bathroom to wash her hands, Camille discovers Rosalind's lifeless body, leaving her shocked. The police are called to the scene, and Rosalind's death is ruled to be an accident, much to the group's disbelief, and Mrs. Landry instructs the girls to return to their rooms. Shaken and unsettled, Helena visits Camille and the two spend time together talking about Rosalind's death and speculating on the possibility of ghosts, sharing a joint to calm their nerves. Meanwhile, Bethany, who is preparing for bed, sees the masked figure lurking in her room and terrified, she screams for help, and the figure vanishes. Bethany insists it was the Edelvine ghost, but Mrs. Landry dismisses it as a hallucination caused by stress and fear. However, Camille is skeptical, reasoning that if Bethany was able to scare the figure away, it might not have been a ghost at all. The next day, Camille, Helena, Alice, Bethany, and Yvonne gather in the study lounge for another seance, this time to contact Rosalind to uncover what happened to her. During the session, they successfully make contact with what appears to be Rosalind's spirit, and the spirit shocks everyone by claiming she was murdered and accuses Camille of being the killer. Chaos erupts as a furious Alice attacks Camille, accusing her outright, and the others grow suspicious and text their families, telling them to hold Camille responsible if anything happens to them, and angry, Camille storms out of the lounge. Later that evening, Yvonne, who is practicing alone for her dance recital, catch a glimpse of the masked assailant. Startled, she pauses but convinces herself it's just her imagination, and just then, the masked assailant sneaks up behind and attacks her. Meanwhile, Camille experiences another haunting from Carrie and becomes increasingly unsettled. Seeking comfort, she moves to Helena's room, and the two bond as they try to support each other amidst the rising terror. That night, Alice receives a cryptic text from Yvonne's phone, urging her to come outside because she is with Lenora. When Alice ventures outside instead of finding her friends, she discovers Lenora's corpse, and just then, the masked assailant knocks her unconscious. Camille, who notices Alice sneaking out earlier, arms herself with a pocket knife and follows her. However, Camille is ambushed and knocked unconscious by another masked assailant. When Camille regains consciousness, she finds herself restrained in the Academy's underground library, positioned next to a still unconscious Alice. Moments later, she is confronted by the masked killers, who are revealed to be Bethany and Trevor, secret lovers. Bethany reveals that she murdered Carrie, and the others, with Trevor's help to cover up the fact that she plagiarized an essay from Carrie. That essay secured Bethany the $250,000 college scholarship, and she couldn't risk anyone exposing her crime. To cover their tracks, Bethany staged the hauntings and manipulated the seance with her phone, faking the communication with spirits to cover up her secret. On the other hand, Trevor reveals he murdered Alicia Kane, the supposed Edelvine ghost, she was his babysitter and he staged her suicide to mask his dark secret. Bethany announced her plan to kill Alice, frame Camille for all the murders, and finally kill Helena in a staged suicide to tie up any loose ends. Bethany grabs Alice's hand and uses her fingers to scratch Camille's face to leave evidence of a struggle. Still restrained but secretly working to free herself using the pocket knife hidden earlier, Camille is caught in the act by Bethany.
Use this to kill Alice.
Meanwhile, Helena wakes up in her room to the sight of Carrie's ghost, facing the window before disappearing, and when Helena looks at the window, she notices flickering lights coming from the library. Meanwhile, as Trevor prepares to kill Alice, Camille announces a startling revelation: she is not the real Camille Meadows, but someone who has assumed the identity to infiltrate the academy and seek revenge for a personal loss. At that moment, the power goes out completely, forcing Bethany to step away to restore it. As Trevor begins to threaten Camille, Helena suddenly arrives and knocks him unconscious. She then frees Alice and the still unconscious Camille, and just then, the power comes back on. As the trio attempts to escape, Bethany ambushes them and knocks Helena unconscious with a hammer. A fight breaks out between Camille and Bethany, but Camille manages to get the upper hand and knocks Bethany unconscious. However, Camille accidentally knocks herself out too. When they both regain consciousness, Camille finally kills Bethany by stabbing her in the throat with a broken light bulb. Alice and Helena finally wakes up, and Camille tells them to escape the library and call the police, while she stays behind to tie up the unconscious Trevor and wait for the authorities. However, when Camille goes to check on Trevor, she discovers he is missing and is now searching for them. He traps Camille behind a bookshelf, but she stabs him in the leg with a knife. In pain, Trevor is finished off when Camille pushes a bookcase on top of him. In the aftermath, Camille grabs some childhood photos of herself and Carrie from her room and gets ready to leave, but before she can, Helena confronts her. Camille admits that she stole Camille Meadows' identity to get into the academy to avenge her best friend Carrie's death. Helena asks how she will ever find Camille in the future, and Camille responds by kissing her, saying she'll find her. Camille then waves goodbye to both Helena and Carrie's ghost, who appears once again, before leaving the academy campus, and the movie ends. Okay guys, that's all the recap about Seance from 2021. Thanks for watching, see you again in the next video.